All right, we're going to be reacting to the American War Against Cuba, a mini documentary by Hassan Piker. We're going to see his perspective on what it is exactly that is sad about Cuba, besides a bunch of imperialism destroying its potentials, which is probably going to be an elaboration. Not a bad thing, but we will see what he has to say.
Right now, as we speak, there are 11 million people living 90 miles off the coastline of the United States of America in a Caribbean island nation known as Cuba, experiencing a severe crisis. Everyday life is being brought to a screeching halt. There are nationwide blackouts caused by a total collapse of the country's electrical grid. There's a shortage of food and medicine. They can't pump drinking water. Cuba has been starved of the most important resource to make modern life work: oil. For over 60 years, the United States has maintained a trade embargo against Cuba. Under the embargo, it's nearly impossible for foreign companies to invest and do business in Cuba while trading with the United States. For years, I've wanted to visit Cuba. I wanted to learn about the problems caused by the embargo. I wanted to see a socialist society in person. Last month, I took the opportunity to go as part of a humanitarian mission to bring aid that my government won't. I'd be accompanying Progressive International alongside hundreds of others from around the world. Activists, journalists, artists, and politicians will be coming to the island by boat and plane to deliver over 40 tons of necessary supplies, food, medicine, and medical equipment. Our first stop is Miami, Florida.
Is Delta United?
No, it's a special plane.
Oh.
It's just Terminal G is where they said we have to go to.
Oh.
Shouts out to Copink, Answer Coalition, Progressive International. They set up a flight with medical aid, solar panels, food, numerous things that the Cuban population desperately needs right now. We are basically the last leg of this international convoy that's coming from all around the world. We're now officially on the third month of Cuba being without oil, and the energy grid collapsed in its entirety a couple days ago for approximately 29 hours until they were able to bring it back up. They're basically operating on 1 HP right now. The entire country is, and it's a total man-made disaster. It should not happen. My goal here is to basically show you guys what the reality looks like on the ground.
We're here.
Havana, Cuba, baby. All right, we're in the heart of Havana right now. One of the things that I've immediately been hit with is how beautiful the city is, but also how hollowed out it is in many ways. It looks like, I mean, some of these houses, they have the skeleton, they have the outside, but inside it looks like it's bombed out, you know? There's people living in it, but like very clearly, this is in a dire state of disrepair.
For decades, Cubans have been driving what in America we'd call classic cars, like this convertible, a Chevrolet Bel Air from the 1950s. But taxi and carpool drivers like this guy wait in long lines for gas, if they can get it at all.
Hundreds of them waiting here all night for simply 5 gallons of gas.
And ever since COVID, fewer tourists have been coming to Havana.
The island obviously has had a significant fuel shortage, and there was a lot of garbage that was piling up. But here in old Havana, they've been able to basically scrounge up a little bit of fuel and are not only doing a little bit of construction work, but also apparently picking up some garbage along the way as well. We're going to be heading to a hospital right now. We're going to be talking to a doctor about what the energy infrastructure and the lack of oil on the island has done to healthcare in general, obviously.
Since the early days of the Cuban Revolution in the 1960s, the government has promised its citizens free healthcare. As a result, the Cuban healthcare system flourished for decades. Cuban doctors were sent on medical missions around the world, providing care to those in need. And even under the embargo, Cuba became a pioneer in biomedical research. But the energy crisis has put all of this at risk. Dr. Juan Guillermo Sanchez Acuna is the chief of maxillofacial surgery at Havana's General Calixto Garcia University Hospital. He described for me what it was like to have his work totally disrupted by the American oil blockade.
The Cuban economy is completely paralyzed by the energy problem. If we don't have any oil, if there's no power, nothing can be produced. So yes, I believe it's the impact that the energy situation has had. this energy blockade on the activity that one performs. Sometimes you're in the middle of an operation and the power just suddenly goes out, right? And we simply continue operating. And the patient, she didn't have her surgery last week because the power failed. And we're going to operate on her this Monday. But today the hospital is having some situations with the anesthetics. For example, there is no isoflurane, no propofol, nothing to reverse the anesthesia. In other words, we're working under very, very difficult conditions. The hospital today only has 5 anesthesia machines, just 5 anesthesia machines. And without replacement parts, for example, we only have 5 monitors for patients when you take them out of. We are working under very harsh, very adverse conditions.
But aren't 5 really enough?
No.
For the whole hospital, 5.
This entire hospital, ¿y qué tan grande es? ¿Cuántos pacientes?
Here, around 450 patients on each floor have problems.
You mentioned that the power went out right before her surgery. Have there been any situations where there's surgery going on and the power goes out? What do you do then? Flashlights?
The facility itself is experiencing some difficulties, right? The entire plant is quite old and outdated. We simply couldn't. We absolutely couldn't manage to complete the surgical procedure. So as a result, we were forced to reschedule the case and then operate on him again.
He was saying that it has happened. They have a generator. The hospitals have a generator, but it's very old. Sometimes it doesn't work, and they just have to close them back up and
That's crazy.
continue the operation over time.
So we're in a hospital compound right now. It's like a complex. It's a massive hospital city almost. I mean, some of the buildings are in a dire state of disrepair. Remember, a lot of the public administrations here in this country, according to the American government, is still technically, and big parts of the economy as well, are technically owned by the Cuban government and therefore the Cuban military. So when American sanctions are applied, they might try to justify it by saying, oh, you're funding a foreign adversary's military. But the reality is, it's funding that would be going to rebuilding these buildings. It's an absolute disaster and totally man-made. It's unbearable to just like experience it in real time. Where you're like, there's unlimited potential here. So many wonderful people.
The American government's interventions with Cuban healthcare doesn't end there. Secretary of State Marco Rubio instituted new rules prohibiting Cuba's ability to send medical aid missions abroad.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio said it will target what he called forced labor linked to the Cuban labor export programs. For decades, Cuba has sent doctors and nurses to natural disasters and disease outbreaks globally.
That's not a joke. That's how much America hates free healthcare. Last year, I interviewed Dr. Jose Armando Aronte, who's the director of international medical missions, when Rubio first announced his intentions to force countries in the Caribbean to kick out their doctors. Since then, numerous countries have caved to the American demands, including in Jamaica. I was fortunate enough to meet up with Dr. Aronte in person and ask him how this made him feel.
When we had the conversation a year ago, Marco Rubio had officially declared it like illegal, but since then, a couple countries have actually removed the Cuban medical aid missions. How does that make you feel as someone who's participated in this?
I'm feeling very bad because I was, for example, I was in Jamaica, you know. The main issue is that the people will suffer a lot because the lack of a the health professional from Cuba. I don't know if you remember, I told you that the Cuban medical health professionals were covering the 100% of the region in Jamaica. Of course, the leaders of the country, I know that they have, they will receive forever the medical care in a private facility, even in the United States or other countries. But the people, you know, the low-income people will suffer a lot with the lack of medical care. The health is a human right. And that's not a political issue. That is a human right, and it's very important for all the people just to receive the medical care that they need just for the life of the people. And that's why the Cuban medical mission has been helping many countries worldwide, you know.
Yeah.
165 countries, more than 605,000 health professionals has been working for more than 60 years in many countries. And just Cuba, even in this condition, is ready to continue the Cuban medical mission and just to try to help the peoples around the world.
Yeah, Cuba's been there for everybody, and now it's time for us to be there for Cuba. All right, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Yeah.
Being in Cuba, I didn't just want to talk to experts or professionals. I also struck up conversations with different people on the street.
But what are we going to do? There's no fuel. People say it affects them, not the rich. It affects all of us, the majority, the common people, you know? Because if you don't have power, what are you going to do?
Well, we're just surviving day by day, like all of us Cubans are doing.
Okay, what was that voice? Also, cutting off the medical awards and people in the medicine department is sort of like a show of force. So it is, but it's saying that the communist government isn't adequate enough to sustain itself. And I think they're trying to represent a turn against its own people. So they're trying to cause like destabilization through just logistical hierarchies and showing certain people get access and others won't. It's trying to show the hypocrisy of the whole ideology. Uh, I believe that the entire dynamic that is the Cuban government is just a very unfortunate one since they are surrounded by imperialists and their only trade route is like in a huge vast ocean with a no network logistical superiority whatsoever. They're essentially left to starve to death by no association to allies since the allies are going to get cut off. Any associated superpowers would be seen as an immediate threat because it'll be seen as a proxy not capable of handling itself and it therefore being manipulated. I believe this is like in the eyes of America a vacation island. It's something they want to take over since it's so easy and weak and vulnerable that they can improve their lives and turn it into Puerto Rico. Um, I think it's just going to become another party area that a lot of people say Puerto Rico's doing great and it's used to be communist or it was under a different rule. Now it's under a better one. Without intervention from a first world country, Cuba's going to be a open air prison with nowhere else really to run to or escape. So it's really just if America helps Cuba, it becomes Puerto Rico and we colonize it. If anyone else helps them, they become a military state front against the most giant imperialist government ever seen, which is why Russia put their rockets there. If you want to help uplift them, you become an enemy of America and then you get invaded and your leader kidnapped. So I think that they're in such a pivotal position for anyone to use however they like a chess piece on a board, that the majority of Cubans just decided to focus on infrastructure, which now they're attacking anyway. So if you do what they want and isolate and keep yourself alone, you go homeless. And they just say, go woke, go broke. Communists are just failing in every measure, and then they use you for propaganda and then take you over eventually, or respect your struggle until eventually you give up. Cuba's in a very bad spot. Very, very bad spot. It's like Haiti. They have a little piece of land, but it's technically leftover place where they just traded slaves at. Here it's a Spanish colony that got taken over and now it's surrounded by the English. It's a very unfortunate situation.
Despite all the significant economic challenges that we currently face.
Trump is a big son of a bitch, man. I just don't get it. Some say he's good, but for me, he's not. Trump has no decency. He doesn't. But he can be president of the United States. He says he owns the world. Since he owns the world, he thinks he owns Cuba.
I feel outrage with him because he's the one governing.
I gotta say something about that voice. Right? Maybe?
Governing his country and wants to govern the world. An international law allows all countries in the world to have their freedom, and he wants to violate and has violated the freedom of all Cubans and other countries. War is always bad. War is always terrifying. I am not afraid, but I wouldn't want it to come.
You wake up and don't know what will happen because they tell you no light, no this, no bread, no that. You are at war 24 hours. You are on edge 24 hours. From when you wake up till you sleep, you are at war. You don't feel the guns or the bullets flying, but you are at war.
One person I spoke to was Carlos Fernandez de Cosio, Cuba's Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs. I asked him about the pressures Cuba now faces and whether this was a warning for the rest of the world.
If most Americans were to be fully aware and were given the facts about the policy of their government against Cuba, they would express their opposition more clearly. Life in Cuba has been increasingly become difficult. It was already difficult in the past because US pressures on the Cuban economy. But if you cut, not Cuba, any country, of the availability of fuel, immediately you start to have impact. And one can see today the panic that is created because of the closure of the Hormuz Strait in the Persian Gulf, how the prices of oil have increased, the problems that countries that are importers of fuel, and a significant part of one comes from that region of the world, how concerned they are, how their economies have started to have inflation, threats of crisis. Cuba has been suffering that for over 7 decades. And at this moment, the US has significantly closed the total availability of imports of fuel to Cuba. A country that needs fuel for its electrical grid, naturally for transportation, for an industry, for industrial production, for the production of food, for services, healthcare, education, for everything, for life. And Cubans have been forced, all segments of society, to live knowing that in the 24 hours of the day, they might have 20 hours without electricity, and sometimes they go through 36 hours, more than a day, without electricity. Do that for weeks and do that for months. Food gets rotten and in the refrigerators. Your timetable and your schedule is altered. You have difficulty in transformation to go to work, to take your children to school, to visit a relative in a hospital, to take a relative to the hospital. It damages health services in general. So the impact on the population is very hard and is very cruel. The majority of Americans would be sufficiently informed about the punishment that is being put on the Cuban people. They would express it in a broader way than it does today.
What is the one of the sanctions part is like 10%, up to 10% of the components that are like American made render any product that you're purchasing to be blocked by the American government.
The U.S. not only prohibits exports from the U.S. to Cuba, and imports from Cuba. The U.S. prohibits subsidiaries of U.S. companies, let's say European companies, African companies, Asian companies, that are subsidiaries of U.S. companies from exporting to Cuba. But it doesn't stop there. The U.S. prohibits any product to be exported to Cuba if it has 10% or more of U.S. components. U.S. components is raw materials, spare parts, software, intellectual property, all of that. In today's world, globalized economy, how many products can you make sure? From a shoelace to a locomotive, to a pair of glasses, to a watch, how many can you make sure that it does not have at least 10%? So most companies around the world, it's not that they know that it has more, they don't go to the trouble. I might run into trouble if I do that because I don't know where these components come from. So that puts a huge limitation on what Cuba can buy. But in addition to that, the US would not allow the import into the United States of any product that has 0.0001% of Cuban component. In other words, no component. So no chocolate bar can be imported in the United States if there's 1 grain of sugar in that chocolate bar. No alcohol if it has an origin in Cuban alcohol. No metal if it has Cuban nickel or Cuban cobalt. No machinery if it has metal that is composed with Cuban nickel or cobalt. To give you some examples, it puts huge limitations on our access to financing and to banking and to obtain revenue. Huge. It puts huge limitation on access to markets for Cuban exports, both services and products. Huge limitations to access to technology. It's very difficult for any economy to develop itself to function without access to technology, and it deprives Cuba to access of fuel. Just with those 4 limitations. Try to imagine any economy in the world, the US, European, Japanese, Chinese, and in which you have those huge limitations. How would they function?
Why do you think America's doing this?
They want to have a capacity to control the fate of Cuba, to create a relationship of dependency and treat Cuba as a vassal state. I don't think they want to annex Cuba, but to try Cuba to be a dominion of the United States. The US wants to restore capitalism in Cuba, go back, and restore a relationship of dependency, again, going back to the past of Cuba. The combination of factors, there could be sentiment of revenge of some minuscule amount of people. There can be ideological differences with Cuba, and simply because Cuba is socialist, and without knowing what socialism means, it sounds strange, it sounds dangerous, so they want to change it. Some people, because they believe the stories that are being told about slavery, about foreign alien enemies in Cuba. But Cuba is not an enemy of the United States. We're not unfriendly to the United States. We are not a threat to the United States. But we perhaps pose an example that for specific people in the United States is unacceptable.
I agree. Electrify the entire grid. Oh, these are fire. Look at this. Turkey.
This current energy situation is what's bothering me the most. The high prices too, most of which are not comparable to what we earn.
I am from Vedado, and you know, it's quite complicated to live a life without blackouts, and suddenly, there's many blackouts. So the school has taken measures. They've regulated classes. You don't go every day anymore, you go one day a week. And that allows you not to be so overwhelmed with transport. But still, the day you go, it's complicated. It's complicated.
We're here with Morid, and he is a Palestinian currently studying for free in a Cuban school of medicine.
Here in Palestine and Cuba, things are all too similar. The only difference is that there are bombs there, and no bombs here. But there's a blockade there, and a blockade here. There people are dying of hunger. Here people are also suffering from hunger, lack of power. There are blackouts there too. So yes, both our peoples are living the same thing, because of the same enemy. We have around 250 Palestinians studying medicine here. And once we complete our studies, we can go back to Palestine to assist our people, because there is a critical shortage of doctors and a severe lack of hospitals to save lives.
This is kind of how I was discussing in one of my videos, how there's not enough places to educate people that are considered third world or lesser in a lot of white people's imperialist perspective. So a lot of these places become HQs of health, HQs of education, HQs of understanding where you can go to gather information that no one else is giving out there. A lot of these people share the concept of getting rid of the religion manipulation that a lot of them will use to radicalize your own people. So they'll offer like neutralization, and that's just intelligence. A lot of these places do offer like what I would call the infrastructure of humanity, and they will help supply them with the logistics of knowing how to distribute this information so that a nation can help thousands, if not millions, of people and spread it. Similar to how you may not know how to fly a helicopter, but if you hire one person to teach you and write everything down, record it as a video, and then you share that with one person, and then that person becomes a teacher of a room of 10, then that's 10 people who could become teachers, and then you multiply it more and more and more, and then you have a whole flight school. And then you have tons of pilots flying their helicopters and planes and whatever you need. You have mechanics doing the same thing, and you slowly spread it out. This is kind of like what I compare it to is quantum supremacy, where even though you have quantum instant flashing of fixing a problem, you still need people to put the labor in order to make that functional, because the human being has to then learn, apply it, use the labor, and it spreads out the instantaneous flashing of information, because now it has this gradients of slowing down until you have to physically make what it developed into a reality. So even though it sounds cool to have quantum computing, if it tells you how to change the future, but you need 100,000 people to move at your will, then that technically didn't instantaneously fix everything. It still needed to make 100,000 people move. And that concept is sort of like when you fight a whole group of people, if you rob them of intelligence and infrastructure, you can technically limit the entire capabilities of them, and therefore they can never enter the same question even without the quantum computer, and therefore they cannot access the same level of processing power, and therefore you're outmatched. You're out how do you say it? The evolution continues faster than you are able to keep up with it. And so the first world stays first and the third world stays third, and then you are seen as lesser in accordance to what they see as a limitation of education, which they did that to Latinos, black people, and women, as well as any other immigrant that came here to America, so that their information be lesser, and they'll put anyone on a pedestal that came from privilege or got lucky, and then they'll use all they're jealous, and they'll pivot your own people against each other until you destroy your own infrastructure to try and build people up again, and they're essentially like dropping you down as they go up, and it just goes continuously. It's something a lot of people get jealous of because they realize the alliances don't exactly have borders that say only Cuba. It goes outward and expands continuously because they know that this problem needs to spread a solution, and that solution, of course, is mass education. So I understand why there's so many diverse people there, like Jamaica, Palestinians, a bunch of other Latin American countries going there to learn and educate themselves, because they're sharing information, and it's become essentially a giant college.
Seeing how the Cuban people, or Cuba as a nation, a country that is in need of so many things, but despite all of that, Cuba is still helping, still sharing what it has.
Do you intend to go back to Palestine one day and become a doctor there? Or what's next for you?
I am specializing in orthopedics so that I can return as a fully trained and complete doctor. I am ready to be on the battlefield, for my people to support them on the front lines. Because in Palestine or in Gaza, especially because of these wars, this 3-year genocide, many people have lost their limbs or have problems with their upper or lower limbs, and they need orthopedic specialists. Thanks to Cuba for granting me this incredible opportunity to become a specialist, which it provides completely free of charge, because nowhere else in the world do they offer that for free.
What made you want to be a doctor, and how much does money factor into that decision? The only reason why I ask this question is because Americans think, one, that all of the Cuban doctors that are sent on medical missions are actually being forced to do this, and also Americans think that doctors only become doctors for money.
Yes, this is capitalism. What they're looking for is how to sell healthcare, to sell medicine, and to find ways to make money from people's health, not how to save them. They don't care about saving lives. What they care about is their own pockets.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, it's gonna be translated in the post. Yeah. It's not about me. I'm just seasoning.
While the US and Israel rained missiles on Palestine, Lebanon, and Iran, a similar kind of siege was taking place against Cuba. The catch, of course, is that in Cuba, it's a siege without bombs. And as this imperial violence becomes more and more impossible to ignore, even the masses in Western countries have radically shifted their perspective. To me, it feels like people all over the world are no longer as susceptible to propaganda for the empire. I took some of my thoughts to Jeremy Corbyn, former leader of the UK's Labour Party, and now a member of Parliament for the new left-wing Your Party. And I asked Jeremy about Cuba, and if this shift in consciousness we're seeing can really change policy.
Oh, thanks, mate. Gracias. Gracias, senor.
Nothing. Do you need an ashtray or something?
No, ashtray. No. We're todo para nuestra salud. Sin azúcar, sin tabac, todo.
Now that the attitude in the Western world has radically shifted against Israel and America in many ways, recognizing the Israeli apartheid, recognizing the genocide, do you feel as though there's an opportunity for people to take a different approach to foreign adversary governments like Cuba that have been designed as foreign adversaries by the American state?
Yes, I do. And I think the governments around the world that are either actively practicing hostility to Cuba or just going along with the US strategy on it are way out of step with what the public think. In the UK, there is no hostility towards Cuba at all. People are actually quite pro-Cuba. I mean, what is it about Cuba that gives you this absurd policy of punishing any company that trades with Cuba by not allowing them to trade in the USA? The Helms-Burton Act is like a sort of global sanction against the private sector wanting to trade in Cuba. I mean, it's absurd. Virtually all of the member states of the UN vote against the sanctions on Cuba, but only, the US, the Marshall Islands, Israel and El Salvador. Young people in Cuba have only ever known austerity. They've only ever known crumbling public realm because of the lack of resources. They've only ever known power outages and power shortages. And whilst they have a very effective health service, it's chronically under-resourced because it needs more research and more medicines. And so I can see how they get onto their iPhone or whatever else, and then they see pictures of unbelievable levels of wealth by a tiny minority of people 90 miles away in Miami. They don't see pictures of the poverty in downtown Chicago. They don't see the pictures of the poverty in so many parts of the USA. And they don't also realize that 30 million Americans have no access to any kind of health care. And it's finished with this. We're in Cuba. Now look out in this wonderful city of Havana. You see the capital there, which is modeled on the US.
Taller. This one is taller than ours.
Is it-
That's what
is
they.
it
That's what
taller?
they were saying. Yes, they're very
my-
proud of that. I'm
oh
proud
my
of it too.
goodness.
Fuck it.
Oh my goodness, I'll go up and have a look then.
Yeah.
But also, you look over there, there's a lot of buildings that desperately need fixing up.
Yeah.
That's the consequences of the blockade.
Yeah.
Cuba is a beautiful place and it's got some fantastic people. So I say to the US, back off, leave Cuba alone, let it develop. And you know what? After a while, you're going to get to love Cuba.
Just because the US is strangling Cuba with sanctions and the oil blockade doesn't mean that Cubans are totally helpless. Cuba, like all other countries, faces a difficult green transition away from an economy based on fossil fuels. Spurred by the latest challenges, Cuba is pushing through a long overdue change for solar power, assisted by foreign friends like China. To learn about Cuba's solar push, I spoke to Dr. Lidice Valiant Roca, head of the Photovoltaic Research Laboratory at the University of Havana and one of the leaders of Cuba's solar energy initiative. Since long before the oil crisis, she's been studying how climate change has affected Cuba, making a green transition all the more critical to the island's future.
Cuba is at the epicenter of not only imperialism, but also one of the more damaging aspects of anthropogenic climate change. The island infrastructure consistently suffers during hurricane season, and there are even rolling blackouts before the oil embargo worsened in these last 3 months. What role do renewable energies play in addressing this crisis?
I think renewable energy is key for the energy independency of Cuba. So this is probably the most important concept. Renewable energy is not only the homework that you have to do for climate change, it's at the same time what is going to give us the independency from the energy production point of view, and it happens that it's also cheaper.
What's the status currently of daily energy usage, daily energy consumption that's been relegated to solar panels?
In 38 is the major level we achieved some days ago.
Yeah.
I mean, in a very, very sunny day with not so high temperatures, of course the production of solar energy reached a peak. But it's moving in the middle of the day, so in the moment in which you have the peak production of solar energy, we have been seeing an increment from 15 to 30 and even more than 30%, which is extremely big even.
Yeah.
Not in general, but for the Cuban conditions, also taking into account it's something that happened in only 1 year.
Yeah.
So
Because where was it even a year ago? What was the percentage?
Less than 5, between 3 and 4%.
This sector, the industry, is heavily dominated by China.
Yes, more than 90%.
Yeah, and I mean it's a complete monopoly. And does that make things a little bit easier as far as being able to purchase certain components? Because the Chinese government doesn't abide by, as far as I understand, American restrictions that normally other countries in Europe, especially in the field of medicine, I've been talking to a lot of doctors.
Yes, I think yes.
Have there been restrictions in any way?
Yes, there are always restrictions anyway. The blockade can reach even China. Because companies are companies, even if they are China-based. And sometimes if the company has interests in other places or related to the American market, they won't risk.
Now, Cuban ingenuity doesn't end with trying to radically restructure the entire energy grid. Cuba's progress in biomedical research has been the envy of the world for many decades. A recent high point was Cuba's homegrown COVID vaccine, the only such vaccine made by a poor country. To learn about this field, I talked to a world-renowned neuroscientist, Dr. Mitchell Valdez Sosa. We discussed both how progress has been limited by American sanctions and what Cuban scientists have been able to accomplish regardless.
Just a couple of decades ago, perhaps 5 years ago, people would come from Miami, Cubans would live there, to buy the cheap medicines in Cuba to sell in Florida, because they were so cheap and inexpensive. Now we're struggling because the United States has systematically begun cutting every source of income to the country.
Yeah.
So they're scaring off tourism. Europeans come to Cuba, they have trouble getting visas for the US. Cruisers are told to avoid it, they can't come to Cuba. And everything bad that can happen here, a blackout, a failure of the power system is amplified in all the media, scaring. So that's part of a policy, scare away the tourists. Cuban medical brigades were working in 60 countries. And these brigades would work in places where the doctors of those countries would not work.
Yeah.
And the countries were very happy with that.
Yeah.
Then the U.S. said, we're going to sanction health officials, ministries of health officials that hire Cuban doctors because they're worried that the Cubans doctors are being exploited. I would like to see the U.S. government worried about sugarcane cutters around the world that are exploited, and they don't care. And this is just an excuse, a flimsy excuse. Then medical exports. We can export products. They do everything to sabotage through their, let's say, the Quislings that live in all these countries that are, U.S. oriented, let's say South America. And then they start saying this Cuban treatment is no good, and they do propaganda in the media, and all this is connected to the U.S. policies. We vaccinated almost 98% of the population. Cuba has the lowest death rate due to COVID. It's not only the vaccines, it's also very consistent messages on using masks, social distancing. Cuba has the lowest rate. And then when we started selling them to Mexico, to Venezuela, to other countries, there were campaigns to try to discredit the Cuban vaccine. And this is part of a consistent policy of simply cutting off every line of income to the country. And then trying to create in the Cuban population dissatisfaction and desperation, and then saying we're going to solve it for you. So you create a problem, and then you're offering a solution. I mean, there are Cubans that maybe will fall for this line, but the majority of Cubans see clearly through this propaganda screen. They know exactly that a large part of our big problems in Cuba, we have many difficult problems, are due to the U.S. embargo blockade, and which has been tightening year after year. We buy equipment in Europe, and an American company buys the manufacturer, and we can't get spare parts. Or we buy expensive equipment in Europe, we want to use it for medical purposes here, and they scare the European companies off. I've spoke to the vice president of a company in Germany that said, I'm ashamed of this. International commerce should not be like this, but we could have problems with the U.S., and that's an important market for us. So there are all these indirect.
That's crazy that the very concept of Cuba's intellectual dominance over the imperialist system just by manufacturing their own scientific cures to illnesses or machinery or anything else they could profit out of just by having some agricultural superiority or some intellectual superiority causes them to even threaten a European nation. Think about how much of that dynamic is purely because out of fear of what they are capable of doing. A scientific society can become truly powerful if not for the ignorance and greed of a monopoly that is the imperialist system. They are truly terrified of Cuba's intellectual capabilities. I think that says a lot about how these people operate. I believe it says a lot about how this system is operating. The oppression onto the people of Cuba is clearly unfair, but it is also something that America sees as necessary because they truly fear Cuba will end up like a North Korean island filled with nuclear weapons and sophisticated technology with the greatest minds there. I think it's truly a testament to a lot of the hard work that Cubans put into their nation and how they truly understand how first world countries will manipulate their entire economy, their social life, their perceptions of reality on what is fair and not fair, and how they always try to pivot them against each other. I believe that dynamic and that understanding of reality is something that a lot of Americans don't understand because we're already in our own hive mind of drone to work, back to sleep, to work, sleep, and we have no real conception of what reality is and what it means to be someone aware of international politics. Since in America you can be proud and ignorant, you could be a proud, ignorant person who never achieves anything and still be somebody who, in the eyes of America, would be so simple that you're more useful that way, rather than someone with an opinion that or discussion that could change the world. These people spend their lives trying to refine and define what it means to be a proud Cuban, but also what it means to be a communist that actually earned their life. And because of that, they're doing everything they can in America to prove that they didn't earn anything at all. So I think it's fascinating. They're going to other leaders in other countries out of fear of Cuba. It's a very, 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 very strong and intellectually supportive system they built in Cuba. Otherwise, they wouldn't be threatening their resources. They would let them have everything they need, and then they would just collapse and fail, and their society wouldn't matter. However, cutting them off and trying to circumvent them proves how much intellectual society is a threat to an unintellectual one, which is more proud of the violence and brute force, but with its intellectual capabilities on top of it. They fear a surpassing of the hierarchy because they know their system can only parasite so much off the working class in America before it collapses, but in Cuba they can uplift everybody, including what they think is the lowest worker. So when they go to Cuba, the lowest worker will still know more and still know to stay quiet or play dumb in order to keep the spy or the imperialist happy. And then when they try to enact actual change to overthrow Cuba, they never succeed because they're able to counter operate on it. I think it's very intelligent. I think the Cuba deserves a lot better than this.
Ways. I remember seeing an appearance by Marco Rubio in the Congress saying, we're not blockading Cuba. There are no ships blocking the ports. And this is hypocritical. It's a policy of strangling the country. Our anti-Alzheimer drug, Senero 201, which we've developed in Cuba and using labs in Mexico and in France because we can't get materials because the US would block them. So what we do is collaborate. But we have people willing to work with us. They are searching for investors, and their lawyers are saying, careful, the US sanctions. So maybe this drug, which we could develop and could benefit all of humanity, is now being blocked, and it's one of the insidious ways, and I can give many examples. We have money to buy material to produce cheap medicines for the Cuban people, and there's no banks that want to work with us because we're sponsors of terrorism, according to the US. We've lived under the embargo and the bloqueo, as we call it, because it's a blockade. We have been living for decades, but this is the worst situation we've lived through, because by scaring oil suppliers off, they're really trying to strangle and destroy our economy. The only good thing that can come out of this, it's so evident now that there is a blockade because they've been denying it for years. It's so evident that they're trying to cut off any source of income for the country, even cut off the oil, that it's impossible to hide anymore.
I believe they're doing that because they're test running a hegemony of oppression so that another nation can never claim they're actually under attack. So then when anyone tries to aid them, it looks like they're crying for help or crying wolf, and then they can just go for the kill shot. And when they go for the kill shot, the defense of that nation who's been oppressed by the hegemony, similar to Palestine, would always look terroristic or brutal or evil, so they can play in the propaganda to slaughter them all. I believe that anyone who's educated in politics can see that very clear as day. But the problem is educating the uneducated, which is the ignorant waves of simpletons who just want the iPod. They want, or the iPods are gone now, but the iPhone, the basic car, maybe a place to themselves, and they want to scroll entertainment. And when you rip them away from the entertainment, they say, "I don't care about politics. Why do I have to care? Why you people? You're just nerds. Who cares? They always win. White people always win." And they just shove it off into what they hope is that it will never affect them, and they only pay attention when there's like a terrorist attack, smoke plumes in the air, someone died by assassination, and they're like, "Whoa, this is so crazy, this is real change," which is ironic because it's a symbol that a huge change is going to hit the American system very soon. And I believe that American system is going to collapse because you encourage war everywhere and you encourage trickery, that same trickery and war will come for you at home. And it's not going to come from foreign adversaries. It's going to come from the very people you're tricking in your own nation, tired of what you're doing. I believe a lot of people are like a fat cat on the in the window still because they've just gluttony ate themselves or satisfied themselves to such a degree where they're distracted enough to not care about any of these issues. And there's a lot of people out here trying to talk about it, but no one cares. Their viewership might even drop because it's not entertaining enough. It's not something that has to be like, whoa, we're here to talk about it. You need to be like an entertainer and not a serious person who's trying to tell someone like, we're gonna die, we're gonna kill millions of people. But that doesn't hit as much. It's like a talking point instead of something that they want to be entertained by. So now people dying is like someone holding up their phone, but they'll only hit record if you're like crying or there's blood or there's someone like begging for help, and it's like this circus show where you have to go and take your turn on each victimized country that America's imperializing and colonizing, and each one gets like money thrown at it like a stripper, and whoever gets the most attention or money is suddenly the winner, and you have to use that to crowd support a bunch of fundraisers and money and attention so you could get political support, because no one cares about human life, they care about entertainment more. So we're now looking at the algorithm of how to switch out entertainment with actual application of human rights and human needs, because now we've demonized the even concept of fighting for a human being as evil, because if you die trying to save a human, that's no longer noble, that's stupid, unless you have like some sad violin music and some like over contrasted video and slow-mo shots of them picking them up with funk music behind them. It's like, are we living in a dystopian techno-fascist society that honestly it's scary, it's really terrifying, because a lot of people are just so hive-minded, so just zombie moded into what they want in reality, that they don't understand this is going to come for them one day, and that day's going to come when no one will scream for them for help, because none of them are going to be alive left, because now you're in the position of being a teacher or a leader who has to grab their head away from the phone and just look them in the eyes and say, I'm a human being. And no one can tell you anything else different, because now you look insane for grabbing them or ripping them away from the phone. Now you got an assault charge because you're losing your mind. But you're in a society that technically just approved killing brown people with accents because it's fair, and it's fair to judge them like Auschwitz, where you can question a Jew just for being a Jewish person. But now if you're brown with an accent, which is a hint at Latino, or anyone from a different nation like Africa, they're now suddenly a foreigner that needs to be questioned. And they're even gonna play these games to fight, make the African fight with the Latino, and then they're gonna bring that out and be like, "Oh, you guys hate each other, just join us." And then you're joining the imperialists. You're going inside the slave house. You're now one of the slave masters, and you feel great about it. I believe this system is extremely toxic and is built to execute and kill anyone who speaks out about it. Because if you pay attention to the ones who speak out, they either have a job doing it, or their entire life is built around it, and they have no free time left. They have to spend every second of every day, because they're using their free time, they're using their weekends off, and they have like nothing else, because again, this system tries to occupy you so much that you just want that 1 hour, that couple minutes of relaxation. Otherwise they'll throw you away to the trash with the rest of them, and now you're bored, tired, and feel like you did nothing for it, and you're not even that much in savings. And this is the richest country in the nation, but in the world, like absolutely the richest. Everyone in America should be extremely wealthy, but there's a lot of peasants and poor people that are just overall just slave minded and don't know how to escape it, because there's white people say he compared you to a slave, he's talking down on you, and that talking point's entertaining because now it appeals to the Hollywood movies where they say mean words to control you, and you follow it because you're such a simpleton. I believe this is an era of just complete ignorance in America. Freedom of speech actually meant freedom to be ignorant so that the master can enslave you again. Because if they had censorship of what is the hypnosis to trick you into being a slave, none of these people would disrespect you because you would be able to spot the exploitation. But now they managed to trick you into thinking anything that spots exploitation is communism and therefore evil and starves people to death, that you have submitted yourself to complete enslavement, because now you can say commie dumb, commie die, commie this, commie that, and now all your buddies are chest bumping and high-fiving and slapping ass, and nobody can really stop them because it's funny when you say it, and it's funny when you entertain other people about it, and you've created this tribalistic understanding of reality. And they're all trying to play the high horse. They're all trying to say, at least I didn't say this, at least I didn't say this, at least I didn't say this. And what is this? Oh, let's talk about this. And then meanwhile people are dying, marching to their deaths. Homelessness is rampant, unemployment's growing. The richest people on the planet don't care because they can build drones and zombie fucking robot guns with laser weapons and chainsaw hands, and they can just build it you with the vast amount of wealth they have. So every time you destroy 10 robots worth 100K, they made like $10 million that same span of time you destroyed 100K worth of equipment. But 100K to us is like a lifetime of funding, because we live frugally due to our peasant life, like lifestyles. And we live at the bottom. We're shopping at dollar stores for food, and EBT's getting cut off because you're finally at a place where you can make your own money, and then they take away your EBT. Now you're starving because you spend every penny on food, and you have even less money than you did before. It's a slave mine. We have to actually see this for what it is, and it's an execution of the poor, execution of working class, and killing off of any true leadership that's out here. Because any true leadership would get pushed into a system of slave labor, which they can't escape. Because now they have to sacrifice their free time just to speak out, and there's nothing but a bunch of rich people everywhere talking down on the peasant, talking down on the slave, and you're gonna have to escape it. It's a PvP zone, just pure PvP, player versus player, person versus person, a bloodbath.
And to make it invisible.
So the sun is going down and I'm using a light to light you now because once again we are without power.
Yep. I forgot to bring snackies in my bag. And that was a big L for me.
But who did bring snackies?
You did, and I ate some of your snackies, which was great. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is yet another day where it's 7:35 and I've yet to eat.
It's dark, man.
So how do we call a cab here? All electricity in this block is gone, is out. Unfucking believable that this is directly a man-made crisis, and what many consider to be is a product of the government's incompetence. It's actually directly a consequence of American intervention in the most vile form. It's crazy. And from what I understand, speaking to some of the people on the ground, a decent chunk of the Cuban population, young Cubans especially, also are unaware of the real reasons as to why this crisis is unfolding since the year 2019, when the initial sanctions packages started rolling in that limited the oil tankers that were able to come to the island. Obviously, this is the most devastating version of this, with threats of interception of oil tankers that are coming into the island. At least the city functions are still working, the lights are working.
For over 60 years, Cuba has served as an outpost of humanity, an island that would lay everything on the line for the sake of a better world. It has done this by sending medical missions to the South Pacific, dispatching military reinforcements to fight the apartheid, and even sharing its homegrown COVID vaccines with the world when wealthy nations hoarded doses for themselves. With this commitment has come a very high price. Every day, Cubans are pushed further to the brink of survival. In Havana, I saw with my own eyes the shadow of Washington's deliberate policy of collective punishment, the horror of patients surviving on hand-pumped ventilators, sweating through darkness with no electricity to ease their suffering. Yet Cubans are, and Cuba is, resilient. There is the doctor who operates by phone light, the Palestinian medical student learning to sew his people back together, the scientist turning the Caribbean sunshine into energy independence, and, of course, there are the hearts of all those in Cuba who refuse to trade their sovereignty for a momentary relief. Cuba's future belongs to no one but the Cuban people themselves. And despite the challenges laid before them in such dark times, the people of Cuba bring all of humanity, step by step, just a bit closer to the light. Cuba has been there for the rest of the world, and now it is our time to be there for Cuba. Patria o muerte, venceremos. Homeland or death, we will prevail.
I think that was a pretty good documentary. My favorite part was probably... Where is it? This is my favorite part right here.
Well, we're just surviving day by day, like all of us Cubans are doing, despite all this
Trump is a big son of a bitch, man. I just don't get it. Some say he's good, but for me, he's not. Trump has no decency. He doesn't. But he can be president of the United States. He says he owns the world. Since he owns the world, he thinks he owns Cuba.
I feel...
That's my favorite part. People not liking Trump, nothing else. They also made fun of Hassan for wearing expensive clothes. I think that was interesting. He's not pictured here wearing it, but I think they said his glasses are here $1,000 or something. I don't think that's a big deal considering these guys are trying to get millions of dollars of imports. They're really trying to make everyone think that Joe, like this guy's wearing gold around his neck. He's Cuban. He has a nice ring.
Had.
A lot of these guys are just nitpicking. They think everyone in Cuba just wants to be poor, and that he's mocking like extremely third world, poor, impoverished, like walking with no shoes on or something, but it's really just a bunch of intellectual geniuses who are pissed off they can't build a market of success because their hegemonic control of that they have on the Cuban people is essentially just a continuation of them not being able to like make their own money, and they know how to make money. They're not dumb in Cuba. They're extremely intellectual. That's why they're scared of Cuba. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to limit Cuba. That's why I think it's hilarious they made fun of him for his clothes. I don't think it was a big deal at all. Even the guy he was talking to had an Apple Watch. This guy here. I believe this guy had that. I kept seeing the laser pop on his ring, but it's like a smartwatch. I think it's this discussion here. Yeah, I'm trying to pause it so you can see it's a smartwatch. Yeah, it's a smart. It looks like a Samsung, but it's like you'll see the red light pop up. These guys aren't poor. You know what I mean? These are like guys who, if they came to America, they make $250,000 and $500,000. Some of them millionaires, but they have a soul, and they use that to uplift their country because they see a bunch of people suffering, and no one cares about them. So it's really up to them. That's why I think a lot of this is just very annoying. Like the equipment this country has is worth millions of dollars, if not billions, and people minimize it entirely. So thank you for watching. This is Hasanabi's The American War Against Cuba. I agree with a lot of his talking points. We need a free Cuba. It's not acceptable what's happening over there. I believe it's just a complete disrespect to what Americans are supposed to see as liberty and justice for all. And I know they only mean that for American soil, which is the sad part. We don't see human beings when we go to other countries. We don't see human beings when we establish connections or discussions with other people. We see a thing to exploit, a resource, a manufacturer to limit and oppress, a production plant that we don't want to produce anymore. We're supposed to be a maintenance of the ecosystem of the world, but we're the ones robbing the potential of a beautiful rose sprouting and showing its bloom. It's truly a disrespect to what it means to be a human. I've had a lot of people limit my life, oppress me, talk down on me. So I understand what this is like. They lie about you, they slander you, they try to take all your resources, all your friends, all your tribal connections, all your trade, all your technology that you can build, and they steal it and push you down and disrespect you. And they're just the grossest, most elitist middle class trash ever, trying to push you down, and they think they're part of the top class of society, and then they role play this idea that they're socialist here in America. I've ran into tons of people like that in America. So Cuba itself, it probably has to run into tons of people role playing as revolutionaries. I think it's interesting to get the viewpoint out there, but I watch tons of documentaries about Cuba, how they're oppressed. These guys are the real deal in Cuba. These aren't like pretend guys. Like there's a reason why a lot of the police and military are careful about who goes to Cuba, because Cuba itself is a place that knows what they're doing intellectually. They're ready for war. They know how to defend themselves because they'll just use systems of self-defense. I think they killed a group of fishermen who had like a bunch of guns to invade the shores of Cuba, and they sunk the boat and grabbed all their weapons, which I thought was pretty intense. Let me see if I could grab that up real quick. Um, Bam. This right here. Cuba unveils new details and fatal U.S. boat shooting that says second boat on a mission failed. Look at all these gear they brought. This is what they confiscated from the failed mission to Cuba. All these ammo, guns, ARs, like weapon system. It looks like they have like a night vision scope on one of them. Like these are actual like weapons of war right here, ready to go, ready to fight. They got snipers, they got shotguns, they got it all. They got it all. They got the long guns. They don't got a sniper, but they're long guns. Look at that. Red dots on the pistols. They got different calibers. These guys were ready to tango. And they sunk the boat. So said about Florida flag speedboat that opened fire against troops in the waters of the island and north coast this week. That was soldiers responding, killing 4 suspects. So they killed all of them. Tango's down. So they're probably playing it off as like a bunch of drug dealers, but look at this. Damn. Right? Damn. Cuba took them out. So it's like a very serious dynamic. Very serious. So thank you for watching again. Sorry, I got a little distracted there. Little news segment at the end there. Cuba should not be messed with. I believe it's a beautiful nation that deserves its respect and dignity. Thankfully, people like Hassan Parker, I guess, checking it out. But we'll see if he's actually a good person or not. Because a lot of these, men don't exactly pull through. Just be careful. That's all I'm saying. You never know who you're talking to. A lot of these people could be very fake. Very fake. We'll see.